The snow had not fallen for 2 days, but it still pressed heavy on the world. It weighed on fences and roofs, pulled at branches, and swallowed whole the ruts of old roads. Drifts leaned against half-buried fence posts like tired animals. The wind, though calm, carried a sharpness that needled the skin, and the sky was the pale gray of ash water. Somewhere far off a crow called once, then nothing. She came up the rise like a ghost. Her coat was stiff with ice, the hem torn and clotted with mud. Beneath it, the calico dress she wore had once been green, but now it was mostly dirt and thread. She walked with a limp, the right foot dragging slightly, her boot worn through at the toe. Snow clung to the edges of her shawl, which she'd tied around her waist, and her hands were raw, split open along the knuckles. The child on her hip made no sound. The others followed, 3 small shapes, bundled tight, walking single file. No one cried. There was no strength left for it. The ranch house stood low and weathered at the end of a narrow valley, half hidden by a windbreak of old cottonwoods. A thin plume of smoke rose from its chimney, curling weakly against the sky. It looked solid. The fence was upright, the barn doors closed, and the animals sheltered inside. Everything about the place looked warm, tended, living. She hesitated. Her feet had stopped moving, though her body still leaned forward like she meant to fall toward it. One of the children bumped into the back of her legs, then quickly stepped away again. She adjusted the baby on her hip and kept walking. The last 20 yards felt like a climb. Her breath came fast and shallow, every muscle aching from miles of trudging. Her jaw clenched against the cold, and when she reached the porch steps, she reached for the railing, but her fingers slipped on the frozen wood. She steadied herself, lifted her hand, knocked. Once, then twice more. Nothing. She waited. A low creak inside. Then footsteps. The door opened slow. Warmth slipped out like a whisper, carrying the scent of wood smoke and something cooking, beans, maybe, or bread. A man stood in the doorway, tall, 30 perhaps, with a worn flannel shirt and heavy suspenders. He did not speak. His eyes moved from her face to the baby, then to the 3 children behind her. They were shivering now, huddled close, their breath fogging the air. She did not speak either. There were no words in her mouth, only the iron taste of exhaustion. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then stepped back. "Come in," he said. The inside was dim but warm. The walls were bare wood, the stove was black iron, and the heat from it filled the room like a blanket. She felt it hit her face and almost wept. The man moved quietly. He cleared a bench near the fire, motioned for the children to sit. They obeyed without question. She stood swaying, slightly unsure what to do. "Sit," he said again, not unkindly. She sat. For a long time no one spoke. The baby began to whimper, and she unwrapped him from her coat and cradled him near the fire. His fingers were like twigs, blue at the tips. She rubbed them between her palms. The man ladled soup into bowls, thick, brothy, with bits of potato and meat floating inside, and handed them out without ceremony. The children stared at the food, then began to eat with quiet desperation. She waited until they were all fed, then took a bowl for herself. It was the first real food she had tasted in 4 days. He sat across from her, arms resting on his knees, eyes steady. "You come far?" he asked. She nodded. 27 miles, she said, her voice rasping in her throat. "From Dry Creek." He didn't blink. Blizzard hit hard out that way. It took the roof. That was all. He seemed to understand the rest. The silence grew thick again, but it wasn't cruel. It wrapped around them like the wool blankets he brought from a chest in the back room. One by one, the children fell asleep on the floor near the fire, their bellies full, their limbs slack. He brought out a kettle and poured her a cup of tea. She held it with both hands, her fingers barely able to grip. "What's your name?" he asked after a while. "May," she said. May Fletcher. He nodded. Calder, Hayes. She nodded back. Outside the wind rose again, brushing against the house like a hand across old bones. Inside the fire crackled. The baby slept now warm against her breast. She leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks she let herself believe they might survive. She woke in the half-light of dawn, her body curled protectively around the baby, her back pressed against the hearthstones. The fire had burned down to coals, but the warmth still clung to the room like a held breath. The children were asleep in a tangled pile of limbs and blankets. One had curled up with a wooden spoon still in hand, as if afraid someone might take it. Her joints ached. Her skin felt tight across her cheeks, wind burnt and cracked. She eased herself up onto her elbows and looked toward the window. Snow glowed faintly blue outside, untouched, smooth as silk. She heard him moving in the other room. Boots on the floorboards. The scrape of a stove lid. A moment later he returned, his hair still wet from washing, sleeves rolled to the elbow. "You didn't wake," he said, not unkindly. "Didn't want to move you." "I didn't mean to sleep," she said. Her voice was soft, embarrassed. "Just meant to rest my eyes." He shrugged. "Did you good?" The baby stirred and whimpered. She pulled him closer, cradling his head in her hand. He was warmer now, breathing easy. "You got names for 'em?" he asked, nodding toward the children. She blinked, then nodded. "Matthew, he's the oldest. Then Ruth. Then Eli. Baby's Samuel." She paused. "I call him Sam." He nodded again, storing the names like fence posts in his mind. "You got folks waiting on you?" he asked. She shook her head. "None left." He didn't ask more. The way she said it made that clear. She reached for her boots and saw how the seams had split across the sides. She looked at her children's shoes, barely holding together, laces tied in knots, soles worn soft. "I can't pay you," she said, almost choking on the words. "I had a little saved, but it's gone now." The blizzard took what was left. Calder leaned against the edge of the table. "I didn't ask you for money." "I don't expect charity," she said. "I can work." He studied her a moment. "Can you cook?" She nodded. "Bake, too. Bread cornbread pies when there's fruit." "No chickens?" "Yes." "Ever mend fence?" She hesitated. "No, but I can learn." He gave the faintest smile, like a crease in a weathered map. "I reckon you can." There was no official arrangement. No handshake, no agreement. Just the way he looked at her, then looked at the children and didn't say no. That day she boiled water and scrubbed her children's hands and faces clean behind their ears. She found a washtub in the shed and washed their clothes, hanging them near the fire. The children helped where they could. Calder brought extra eggs in from the hen house and left a block of lye soap on the shelf without a word. Later she found a broom and swept the corners, cleaned the stove, peeled potatoes and made a stew with what was left in the cellar, canned tomatoes, a single onion, beans. He ate it without comment but went back for seconds. The children were quieter now, not from fear but from the strangeness of safety. They stayed close to her skirt, watching Calder with wide eyes, but no questions. That night he brought in a mattress and laid it in the corner for them. Gave her the bed in the room off the kitchen. She tried to protest, but he only looked at her once and said, "You need it more." She lay in that bed with the baby pressed against her chest, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the wind whistle through the crack. She did not cry. Not yet. But the tears pressed hard behind her eyes, not from grief, but from something far more dangerous, the slow return of hope. The next morning he handed her a pair of old boots. They were a little big but held together strong. "They were my sister's," he said. "She's been gone some years. I'll take care of them." "I know." They worked side by side. He showed her how to lift fence wire without tearing her gloves, how to use her weight instead of her arms when hauling feed. She fetched tools, carried water, boiled coffee before the sun came up. He did not talk much. Neither did she. But there were small things, the way he poured her cup first, or how he nodded once in approval when she patched a rip in his shirt without being asked. It was not kindness born of pity. It was something quieter. Respect, maybe, or the beginnings of trust. One evening, as the children slept and the snow fell again in soft, slow flakes, he brought out a small carved box, opened it, and pulled out a square of cloth embroidered around the edges. "My mom made this," he said. "She always said, even hard ground can grow something if it's turned right." She ran her fingers over the stitching, a tiny red flower blooming at the corner. "Did it?" He shrugged. "I'm still here." So was she. If this felt earned, subscribe for what comes next. The snow began to melt in slow, reluctant patches, peeling back from the fence posts and wagon wheels like an old skin. Mud showed through thick, black clinging, and with it came the ache of spring work. Calder dug the field rows by hand, using a plow too small for the land but just big enough for one man to manage. May followed behind, dropping seed with Eli at her side, the boy mimicking her motions with careful, serious hands. There were no plans spoken aloud, no promises. But with each day she moved deeper into the rhythms of the place. She milked the cow before sunrise, taught Ruth how to bake a flat cake without burning the edges, wrapped Matthew's fingers when he tore them stacking wood. Her hands cracked again from the cold, but she rubbed lard into the splits each night and said nothing. One morning, Calder came in with a shallow cut on his temple, blood streaking through the dust on his cheek. He muttered something about a startled mule and went to wash it off, but May was already at the basin with a clean rag. "Hold still," she said. He did, though his jaw worked slightly. "You need stitches," she told him, dabbing around the cut. "I'll live." "I didn't say you wouldn't." He glanced at her then, and their eyes held for a second longer than needed. She could smell the sweat on his skin, the dust and cedar. She looked away first. Later that week they mended the south fence together. May held the post upright as Calder drove it down with a mallet. He paused to catch his breath, pressing a forearm to his brow. "You ever miss it?" she asked. "Miss what?" "Before. Whatever life you had." He stared out over the field for a long time before answering. "My brother and I built this place," he said, "after the war. He didn't make it long. Fever took him one winter. I'm sorry. I was 16 when I dug his grave." He looked at her now, calm but tired. "What I miss don't matter. It's what's still here that does." She didn't say anything, but her throat tightened. That night she found herself outside after the children had gone to sleep. The moon was high, casting silver across the snow-melted fields. Calder was on the porch, boots off, socked feet resting on the rail. A small tin cup sat beside him. He gestured toward the step beside him. "You want to sit?" She did. He poured what little was left in his cup into a second one and handed it to her. It was something sharp, whiskey watered down, but it warmed her mouth. "They sleep sound," he said, nodding toward the dark window. "They do now. They trust you." She looked down into her cup. "They don't have much choice." "They do. Children always do. You held them together." "I tried." They sat in silence a while, the breeze brushing against their collars. A coyote called from the ridge. Then another. Calder leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You know, I used to think this land break me," he said. "Every winter I'd wonder if this was the one. But it's not the cold or the hunger that wears a man down. It's the quiet, the kind that gets into your bones." She looked at him. "And now he looked back. It's not so quiet anymore." She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Spring thickened. The trees near the creek turned green at the tips. Chickens began laying again. The baby took his first steps, waddling from one sibling to the next like a drunk. May laughed when he fell down in the straw, and Calder looked up from the trough just in time to see her smile. She had not smiled like that in months, not since before the snow, maybe not since before her husband died, though she never said his name and Calder never asked. He noticed her more now, how she pressed her palm against the doorframe when she thought, how she wore her hair in a knot tied with the same strip of muslin each day, how she sang to the baby under her breath, nothing fancy, just a hum and a sway of her body. One afternoon, while the children were gathering wild onions, Calder brought her a wrapped bundle from town. Inside was a new dress, plain brown but sturdy, and a pair of gloves. "I thought maybe," he said, "you could use something that was yours." May held the fabric like it might disappear. She didn't speak. "If it's too much—" "It's not," she said, her voice rough. "It's kind." He nodded and went back to stacking feed sacks. She watched him for a long time. It was kindness, but it was more than that too, and she felt it beginning. Not love, not yet, but something soft and waking. Something that looked like the edges of home. The air turned sweet with cut grass and warming earth. Days stretched long, and the land unfurled like it had been holding its breath all winter. Calder planted beans in tight rows. May worked beside him, sleeves rolled sweat at her temples. The children ran barefoot between chores, skin freckling under the sun. In the quiet evenings she sometimes found herself watching him from the window, how he carried himself with a kind of careful patience, how he spoke to the horses like they understood every word. Once, when Ellie twisted his ankle in the barn, Calder lifted the boy gently, murmuring something only the child heard, his hand steady as oak. She realized then she had not seen a man be gentle in a long, long time. That gentleness seeped into their days. She started setting aside extra coffee in the mornings, just the way he liked it, strong and near boiling. He brought in wildflowers and left them without comment in a jar on the shelf. They didn't speak of these things. They didn't need to. But just as things softened, something shifted. It began with a letter. Calder brought it in from town, postmarked from St. Louis. His name was written on the front in a woman's hand. He didn't open it right away, just tucked it in the breast pocket of his shirt and went about his day. May saw it, said nothing. By nightfall the letter lay opened on the table, its contents unreadable from a distance. Calder sat beside it, elbows on the wood, his brow furrowed deep. "Everything all right?" she asked finally, her voice careful. He nodded once, then shook his head. "It's from my aunt," he said. "She's old now. Wants me to come east, settle some things with the estate. Says I've got a claim to the house, maybe more." May's stomach turned slow. "Will you go?" He didn't answer right away. His fingers traced the grain of the table. "She says it's a chance to start over," he said, "that I've wasted enough years out here." "And what do you say?" "I say this land's in my bones. But I'd be lying if I said I never wondered what else there might have been." Silence stretched between them. The lamp hissed low. "I should've told you," he added. "Didn't mean to keep it quiet." May shook her head. "It's your life, Calder. You don't owe me anything." But something inside her shrank. A space that had been filling with warmth now felt hollow, windblown. The next few days wore thin. He was kind as always, but quieter. She caught him staring out toward the road more than once. The children noticed too. Matthew became short-tempered, Ruth clingy. May did her best to hold it all together. That Sunday after supper she stepped out onto the porch alone. The sun was just dipping, throwing copper over the fields. Calder followed after a moment, carrying 2 mugs. He handed her one. "I don't know what I'm going to do," he said. She nodded. "I figured. I've lived this way for so long I forgot there might be another path." Then you showed up. You and those kids and I started to think maybe I'm not meant to be alone after all." Her hands tightened around the mug. "But if I go," he went on, "and take what's offered, I could start fresh. Better land. Better home." She turned to him, eyes sharp now. "And if you stay?" He looked at her, long and hard. "I don't know. I just know it'd be harder to leave than I thought." May swallowed. Her heart beat loud against her ribs. "You said your mother believed even hard ground can grow something?" He nodded. "Maybe it already has." They didn't speak again that night, but something hung between them, raw, unresolved. She woke early the next morning, packed a small basket of food for the children to take on their walk to the creek, kissed each of their foreheads. Then she sat at the table with a needle and thread mending the hem of the dress Calder had given her. If he left, she would not ask him to stay, but she would not pretend it wouldn't hurt. When he came in from the barn later, dusty and sun-tired, he found her sitting in the doorway, the baby asleep against her chest. She didn't look up as he approached. "I'm not afraid of starting over," she said quietly, "but I'm tired of being left." Calder stood behind her for a long moment, then lowered himself beside her, knees creaking. "I'm not going," he said. May turned. He met her eyes, steady and sure. "This," he gestured to the porch, the fields, the sound of the children's laughter in the distance. "This feels like something I didn't know I needed." She didn't speak, but he saw the wet shine in her eyes. He reached out, touched the edge of her sleeve, light as breath. "I don't want better land," he said. "I want this land, with you on it." She leaned her head against his shoulder. He let it rest there, and for the first time there was no weight in the silence between them. That night the wind shifted. It came down off the hills, warm and slow, carrying the scent of rain and something sweet, maybe blooming clover, maybe cottonwood. May opened the windows and let it in. The curtains stirred like breath. The children slept deep, their limbs heavy from a day spent under the sun. In the dark, Calder stood at the doorway to her room. He didn't step in, didn't speak, just leaned his shoulder against the frame. She looked up from where she sat, sewing a new patch onto Eli's trousers. "You sure?" she asked, soft. He nodded. "Wrote my aunt this morning. Told her I'm staying." May set down the needle. "You think she'll understand?" "She might not, but I do." He looked around the room at the narrow cot she'd made into a kind of order, her shawl folded on the chair, a tin cup of dried flowers on the sill, Sam's little blanket stitched from scraps. It was still plain, but it was hers, and it was theirs. "You'll need more land," she said, "if the crops take." "I'll clear the back lot," he said. "Could run another fence line before fall." She nodded. "You'll need help." He smiled faint. "I know someone handy with chickens." She didn't laugh, but her eyes warmed. The next day they planted together. Tomatoes and squash this time. Ruth and Eli dropped seeds and covered them. May's hands were stained with soil to the wrist. She moved slow but sure, her shadow long in the morning sun. Calder watched her from the well, one hand resting on the pump handle. Later he found her in the barn, oiling the hinges on the feed bin. He came up beside her and set something in her hand. A ring. It wasn't gold, just a simple band, pewter worn smooth. There was a small groove carved into it, shaped like a wheat stalk. "This was my mother's," he said. "It's not much." May ran her thumb along the edge. It was warm from his palm. "I never thought I'd wear one again," she whispered. "You don't have to." "Not unless you want to." She looked up at him. The barn was quiet, dust floating in the beams of light like ash. "I want to," she said. They were married a week later under the cottonwoods. Matthew stood beside Calder. Ruth held her mother's hand. The preacher from Red Hollow rode in with his wife and brought a hymn book. They sang one verse off key and slow. May wore the brown dress he'd given her with a new apron sewn for the day. Her hair was plaited back, the gray at her temples left as it was. She didn't cry until Calder said her name. Just her name, plain and steady. May. Like a promise. Afterward they ate cornbread and beans. Someone brought a jug of cider. The children ran in the field until their feet were stained green. Calder built a fire and they sat around it until long past dark, the stars bright above them, no moon in sight. That night, when the house was quiet and the children asleep in their corners, May stood in the doorway of the room that had once felt borrowed. Calder reached for her hand and pulled her in without a word. There were no grand gestures. Just the way she fit beside him, the way the room felt full with both of them in it. Time passed. Summer thickened, then softened into the golden ache of fall. The crops came in slow but steady. The cow birthed a healthy calf. The children grew taller, their voices louder in the yard. Sam took to toddling after Calder, fistful of grass or twine or nothing at all. One evening May stood at the stove, her belly just starting to swell again. She rested her hand on it as she stirred the beans, her eyes soft, unfocused. Calder came in from the barn, shook the dust from his coat, and stepped behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. "Think this one will be a girl?" he asked. "Maybe," she said. "We'll call her Grace if she is." May nodded. "And if it's a boy?" He smiled. "Then we'll wait and see." Outside, the land lay quiet. The house behind them breathed slow and strong, and the future, once a cold road lined with loss, now opened ahead of them like a field ready for seed. The night's not done yet. Subscribe and stay by the fire.